invoking the presence and blessings of the divine, most respected Professor P.K. Aluwali ji, the keynote speaker and inaugural address, Professor C. Nagaraj Kumar ji, IAPT President RC3, Dr. Pawan Sharma, Executive Member and the Organizing Secretary for this FDP, and dear participants, we welcome all of you to this online faculty development program, which is being organized jointly by IAPT, Indian Association of Physics Teachers, and Central University of Himachal Pradesh to commemorate the centennial celebrations, birth centennial celebrations of Dr. D.P. Khandelwal, who is the founder president of IAPT. We pay our homage to him, and we are really fortunate to have such a great personality who has given us this platform for all the physics teachers of the country. And I'm thankful to Dr. Professor Subhash Samunga, who has given us this opportunity to conduct this 1 week faculty development program. Today, due to some busyness, our Honorable Vice Chancellor
Good evening, sir.
was not able to.
We cannot audible properly.
Hello. Is this on? Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Now is it okay? Or should I hold it and speak? Okay. I will hold and speak. So today, fortunately, by God's grace, as chief guest, we have our TAB coordinator, Professor B.C. Chauhan, who has taken some time out to be able to be with us. Now I request Professor B.C. Chauhan to kindly say a few words for this particular FDP, and after that I will introduce the keynote speaker, Professor B.C. Chauhan.
Yes, so am I audible? Hello. Okay. Thank you to all, and it's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this inaugural session of this 1 week program, faculty development program, which is being organized by our university and Department of Physics and IAPT. So it's really a great opportunity for me to be with you in this occasion. And I came here just by chance I should say that because Honorable Vice Chancellor was not able to grace this moment, but it happened to be for me that to be there with you. So it's as we are all aware of this. This is a centenary celebration of Dr. D.P. Khandelwal, the founder president of IAPT. He was from basically Punjab University, and online faculty development program started today. It is going up to
Sir, please loudly.
it is going up to
21st of
November
November
with a
with the
title
title
Model
Model
Based
Based
Simulation
Simulation
in
in
Classical
Classical
Physics
Physics
using
using
Axos.
Axos.
So
So I
I congratulate you
congratulate you
all
all
organizers,
organizers
and
and
we will be happy
happy
to
to
see this extra dimension of learning.
learning.
We have
We have
experiments, and
experiments,
this is
and this is
something
something
to work in the
work in
virtual world
virtual world
through
through
computers.
computers.
The
The
simulations
simulations
that we
that
we are going
you
to
are going to
learn all
learn
the
all the
features.
features
We have with us Professor C. Nagaraja Kumar from Punjab University, the president of IAPT RC3, and Dr. Pawan Sharma, executive member and organizing secretary of this program. We will be happy to and we will be enlightened to hear Professor P.K.
P.K.
Ahluwalia.
Ahluwalia.
He is
He's
our
our
guru
guru
also,
also,
and
and
he's a
he's
renowned
a renowned
physicist
physicist
of the
of the
country,
country,
and
and
we will be
will be
learning
learning
his
through his
inaugural
inaugural
address
address
in this
in this
occasion
occasion
about
about
computers, because
computers.
I
Because I
remember when
remember
we
when we
were in the
were in the
university,
university,
he was the
he was
first
the first
person
first
in the department
department
who
to
introduced
introduce
computers to us,
computers to us.
because at
Because
that
at that
time
time
in
in
90s
90s
or
or
so,
so,
or
or
late
late
80s,
80s,
the
the
computers were
computers were
just
just
introduced in our
introduced in our
department.
department.
He was the
He was the
man
man
who
who
initiated this
initiated this
from that
from
time.
that time.
This,
This,
the computers to
computers from
all students and
students and
teachers.
teachers.
So I am
So I'm
really
really
lucky, I would
lucky, I would
say,
say,
to
to
be
be
with you
with
here
you here
today,
today,
and
and
to
to
learn
learn
and
and
hear
hear
the inaugural
inaugural
address
address
of
of
Professor P.K.
Professor P.K.
Ahluwalia.
Ahluwalia.
And
And
this is
this
really
is
a
really
great
a great
moment for
moment for
me
me
also,
also,
and to be
and
a
to
part
be a
of this
part of this
all
all
FTP
FTP
program.
program.
Thank
Thank
you one
thank
and
you
all.
one and all.
And this is
And this is
I wish
I wish
this to be a
this to be a
successful
successful
program
program
for the week,
for the
and
weekend.
I hope all will
All will
learn
learn
uh, the best
the best
possible out of
possible
this
out of this
workshop.
workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One and all.
One and all.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you,
BC
Professor
Chauhan.
B.C. Chauhan.
So
So
we
we
begin
begin
our
our
session now
now
after the
after the
small
small
initial talk
initial
by
talk
our
by our
colleague here.
colleague here.
To
To
introduce
introduce
Professor P.K.
Professor P.K.
Ahluwalia, it's
Ahluwalia
always
is
a great
always a
pleasure.
great pleasure.
Am I
I'm
audible to all
audible
of
to
you?
all of you?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, you are audible, sir. Yes, you are audible, sir.
Thank you. I request others to kindly mute their mics because
Your voice is not clear as well as there is echo.
there's an echo. That's why I was also asking whether my because a lot of people
Yes.
are. I think I'll slightly reduce the volume. Hello, can you hear now? I think it's better. Okay, once again, uh, welcome to the 1 week faculty development program. And it's our pleasure to have Professor P.K. Ahluwalia, a professor of physics who has retired recently from the Himachal Pradesh University. He is well known to all the physics teachers in the country, but yet as a convener of this program, it's my pleasant duty to introduce Professor P.K. Ahluwalia to all of you once again. Sir has been an researcher in condensed matter physics, and in fact, as Professor B.C. Chauhan has just now mentioned, he is the one who spearheaded the idea of computer simulations in our country. Not only has he introduced computational techniques in physics as a course in HP University in 1991, he, along with Professor R.C. Verma and Dr. K.C. Sharma, have written the first book on computer simulations in physics, because of which we all got introduced to this subject. And of course, almost all the people whom you are seeing on the list, the speakers, I think in almost all of us have been his students. So that speaks about what. Hello. Yeah. So you see, Dr. Sapna Sharma has been his student. Dr. Pawan has been his student. And of course, I'm also his student because I have also learned the great things. In fact, how to do simulations in worksheets, all these things. And Dr. Sapna Verma also is his student. So almost all of them whom you are seeing in the list, we are all some way or other related to Professor P.K. Ahluwalia. And Professor P.K. Ahluwalia has also been the one who has put IAPT on the digital domain. He is the one who got the first website going for Indian Association of Physics Teachers. And so he has held many positions, like he has been the director of director planning, and he achieved the best teaching excellence from HP University from the governor of Himachal government. And he has also been the director of UIIT, University Institute of Information Technology, for almost 8 years. He spearheaded that, and as a project by the students, he actually brought the website of IAPT working. I remember, in 2006 when he conducted the IAPT national conference in Shimla. That was the time it was, inaugurated, and he showed all the beautiful things. Unfortunately, of course, many of his dreams and vision still remained unfulfilled, and we hope that this coming year we will once again have his leadership guiding us forward to take IAPT to new heights. So thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation to be the keynote speaker for this workshop. And we look forward, as usual, as ever, to your very enlightening talk on computational thinking. This is one of the key skills required in the 21st century, along with collaboration. Right, collaboration is one important aspect of 21st century learning goals. But from the science perspective, computational thinking is one of the most important skills that every student should pick up. So it's indeed our good fortune that all of us have tried to join this FDP, and sir is going to talk to us about how in the new education policy there is going to be a paradigm shift if we bring in computational thinking to the students. So with this few words, I now request Professor P.K. Ahluwalia sir to kindly take over and enlighten us. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir.
Is it loud enough to listen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
okay, thank you. My only request is that when I am making a presentation, you keep your mics in the mute mode. Otherwise, there will be echo and there will be mixing of sounds also. So that will actually be a bit, uncomfortable for each one of us. So let's take care of that. So I'm very happy to be part of this faculty development program. I am very happy to see our Regional Council 3 President, Professor Nagaraj Kumar, here in this workshop, in this FTP. Welcome, sir. I am also able to see my very dear student. I hope he is here. I'm able to see him. Dr. B.C. Chauhan. Yeah, now I can see him. Okay, welcome. Right. And I can see Pavan. I can see Ma'am Vandana also. I think she is here. Maybe somewhere not visible on my screen, but she is definitely there, I think.
Yes, sir. Good
Okay.
afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. And I think I'll make new friends now. So thank you very much, Professor Bhagchan and Professor Shastri for taking these initiatives. I think now your physics department of the Central University is really taking lots of initiatives and leads in online connectivity with not only your own students, but with the rest of the physics community also. So when Shastriji asked me to be part of this, I could not say no. I only want to make one, small change in when Shastriji said that I have recently retired. Shastriji, I am not recently retired. It's almost six years now, more than that. But I think I must thank people like you that they have made me, a bit relevant in this time. So I keep on, coming to such programs, learn new things. Though I am not, very much into coding, etc. right now. I have a few other interests which I have developed. I am focusing on those, and they are not necessarily from physics also. So please pardon me for all these things. Uh, I have actually been going through national education policy, and it has been widely accepted, let me say that, in the country. Across the board, people have realized that there are some very good things in new education policy. And one of the new good things is that there are new paradigms which have been identified for school education, for higher education, that means colleges, universities, and research institutes. And though as physics students and teachers, we know that we have been realizing these things a lot earlier than when this national education policy started talking about it, that the key to understanding physics is always problem solving. And problem solving maybe is something with which physics people actually get identified as a separate group also. They have that kind of a skill that they can be very useful. Rather, lately the software companies have also realized that it is better to have BSc students in their software companies for modeling and coding than engineering students, because of their very different bent of mind in looking at the problems itself. So this is a very encouraging thing. So what has the new education policy done now, that it has once again brought all these things into focus. It has started talking about all these things in a very, very systematized manner. And that's what we are actually looking forward to. So this is where I actually start as far as my presentation is concerned. The title of the presentation is nothing but Developing Mathematical and Computational Thinking Among Science Students, New Education Policy Paradigm. When University Grants Commission was creating its model syllabi, it has been doing it for quite some time. They have also been, talking about problem solving. Slowly and steadily, they started introducing some exercises in the curriculum itself based on programming. Earlier everybody was using this term programming. Now we are changing it. We are changing it to simulations. And now when Shastriji thought about this particular FDP, he has given a very interesting name, model-based simulations. So model-based simulations mean what? And I think since we started doing these kinds of computations on computer as way back as 80s, I think things have changed. We are part of that journey. I have been specially part of that journey. Simple PCs coming, PC XT coming. Then there was a shift from common PCs to tabletop PCs with more memory, with better central processing units. And suddenly we are finding that all these kinds of devices are in our hands now. The kind of mobile which we are using these days is also capable of doing all those calculations which we used to do earlier. And even, there were certain constraints to begin with there, that whenever we talked about some kind of a programming compiler or something like that, people needed to buy that. Whereas with the coming of open source software movement now, we will see that, and we are seeing that these tools are very easily available to the students. The tool on which this FDP is going to focus, that is Scilab, which is actually a short form of scientific laboratory. We have really gone on a very, very long path at a very, very rapid pace. With the coming of the COVID, we realized the importance of online learning and teaching. And this FDP, which we are conducting, is also in that mode only. I would say thanks to COVID, though I should not say like that. But I think I can't stop saying this thing, that COVID has come to us as a calamity, but it has made us learn very many new things. And one of these things is reaching out to our community at far off distances in a very effective and simple manner. So when I think this new education policy was being framed, these people were realizing that almost whole of the world is getting digitized. And I think India did that at a very rapid pace, I would say. And today, the reach of digital communication is almost available in the remotest corners of the country also. Whether you think in terms of remote places in Himachal Pradesh, we are very remote in some places, or remote places in Rajasthan, or remote places in Northeast, you will find that everywhere, in one way or the other, this kind of digital communication is available. So I think that makes us quite happy also about it, that we are now ready to emphasize this fact that we need to develop mathematical and computational thinking, which can be done so very, very rapidly. There is one thing which again comes into focus here. When I am talking of teaching a physics course, I think once again we are emphasizing there the importance of mathematical thinking. I think none of our models can be analyzed without mathematical tools. But these mathematical tools always had limitations, and those limitations were part of the analytical methods which we used to employ in solving physics problems. So we could do something on the blackboard which was basically solvable on the blackboard itself. And the best part of that was that we have, as physicists, learned lot of tricks to simplify the problems and make them tractable. And in that fashion, we were always constrained in actually applying physics to real and very complex problems itself. And that is where the computer came. And it opened for us a third way of doing physics, where we are not scared of, applying our mathematical thinking in a what you call more ambitious manner. So when we are actually talking about, say, solving a harmonic oscillator, people are saying, why only stop at harmonic oscillator? Why not move to enharmonic oscillator? And that too, why not only say bringing in which is say up to second order or third order, but much more you can really bring into the picture. So that is why, the mixing of these things developing mathematical and computational thinking two together is inherently a very, what you call easy transitional aspect. And I can see in the last now more than 26, 27 years when we started working on computational physics, things have changed a lot. But the basic ideas have remained the same. They have not changed. And I think this new paradigm we must bring in very, very effectively in our classrooms to make our students more skilled, not only from the point of doing physics, but also from the point of finding jobs in the market also. Because once we tell somebody that we know or we have computational skills also, we get slightly more respect than when we say we are very good at, say, theoretical physics. And we now know that there are three ways of doing physics. One is experimental, which we cannot really say that it is not at all needed. This will always remain the most important cornerstone of thinking. Then came theoretical physics, which actually tried to understand what we were seeing in our experimental framework, that how to understand it, how to put it in simple forms, formulae, which we can appreciate and analyze very, very easily. And one of the other tools which people were using in theoretical physics was graphing. They always used to say that if you have derived a formula, it makes no sense unless you try to see how it gets visualized. And in computational thinking, today we have those computational tools available, which make us, do all these things in a very, very simple fashion. So this is one aspect which I want to emphasize with you in this first lecture of this FDP itself. And that is a very important part. What is, I believe, I tried to really sit down and see that if this kind of a workshop is to be undertaken, particularly for physics students or physics faculty, then what are the things which we should really keep as our objectives? One is that appreciate the importance of mathematical and computational thinking itself. So maybe we need to talk to our students about both these aspects, mathematical thinking and computational thinking. Then we must also emphasize, as I emphasized earlier, computation as a third way of doing science. Today we know that there are many things which we have discovered. We have discovered first by doing those things in the computational lab and then asking somebody to perform the experiments, whether that is actually happening in the real world or not. Third thing which is very much there and which we have been actually doing even for our students. Earlier, what we used to do was to teach them numerical methods. And we will just stop there by saying that, yes, we will stop here, but we will try to run these numerical methods to solve, say, an integral. We were telling them Simpson rules, say, for example. But it was very rare that we tried to make a link with the physics problems or the physical problems for solution. Today, we are far more tuned towards that direction. So I hope the participants in this workshop will find that kind of a message from this faculty development program itself. Also, I hope that Shastriji is going to really talk about it also, that we will be able to write down an algorithm of a problem at hand before we go for coding itself. When we are saying, doing coding, that means that this is not the first step, but it is the second step which we take after we have understood the algorithm of the problem itself. And algorithm only means unambiguous steps taken in a series which we can perform to solve a particular problem itself. Then once we actually try to convert this algorithm into a code in a typical programming language, which is the one you may be very happy with, or maybe that is the one which is available to you, you will be able to visualize the numbers crunched out by the computer to make an intuitive and physical sense out of those and check whether the results are physically correct or not. Now, one of the best things which one does in computation is that we are not worried about whether the kind of problem which we are going is going to crash or not. If I had been doing an experiment in a lab, I will be very careful and I would love to really think that my experiment works and gives me new insights. But here, you can always, keep on what I can call doing some trial calculation and see that what you need to tune and what you need to really get as an understanding so that you can tell an experimentalist to do a kind of a real life check. Then implement the knowledge and skills to a given statement of the problem or project. Now, this is very important, that if I desire that my students should be very effective in solving physics problems, I should be able to give them the real life problems in the form of projects, so that they are able to translate them into algorithms by keeping few things in mind and get you some answers which are plausible, reasonable. Maybe you may find that they may have conjectured something new. Now, this is what we can try to do. If you ask me my preference of, initiating people into these kinds of problems, spreadsheets, which are basically a big matrix, are my favorite. And I think Scilab also comes in that category because Scilab actually is a kind of a replacement in an open source environment for that mathematical software, which is very popular with engineers, particularly the MATLAB. And it's very powerful. And the most important part of that is this, that very many mathematical tools which we require for solving problems are already built into it. Rather, what people have done, they have developed what you call toolboxes for handling problems of different domains in science and engineering. And there are some kind of common overlaps because physics is the mother science for all these subjects, that whatever they have done, that can be easily, tried in a physics classroom also. So I think that is where I would say that these are the kinds of things which you may hope as the objectives of this workshop. So now if I say that, what am I going to learn from this particular lecture itself? I think if I want to really be a kind of a computational physicist or a computational scientist, then the method remains the same. It doesn't change much. Only thing is that maybe the inputs which you need to bring into the solving of the problem may be far more complex than what you start with in, say, a beginning course of computational physics itself. So we would like that in this particular FDP, you will be able to appreciate the place of computational methodology in the study and research of science, physics, chemistry, mathematics. These are basic sciences, and they are actually, in a way, the supporting knowledge for engineering also, or for technology also. So this is one thing. Now, I would like to really once again recall for you in this first lecture itself that how do we formulate a physical problem? And the ideas are very simple. I think in the last 20-25 years, whatever I have been learning, these things have not really changed. They remain the basic things to appreciate and put into practice itself. And we must really also be very clear in visualizing the role of mathematical modeling. I'm very happy that there is a lot of emphasis in this particular workshop on mathematical modeling itself in classical domain only. Maybe as a sequence to this lab, uh, we may come across the quantum domain also as a special course. We know that these days people are talking a lot about, developing skill set for quantum computing. The first part of it itself says quantum means you will have to know physics, but then how to employ those tools to do computing, which is very fascinating, which is emerging as something which is the computational way of tomorrow. We need to really emphasize on these aspects of learning computation itself, and what are the new paradigms in that also, like quantum computing. Also, I'll pick up some mundane problem to demonstrate that methodology of modeling, uh, which is followed by actually any professional coder also. One of the very important things which has to be kept in mind whenever you have to do computation is the inherent characteristics of numerical computing. And what are those characteristics which we need to really keep in mind? And we should not be blind to all those things also. And also, finally, the kind of computing environment which you would like to work, choice of programming language needed for doing physics. Like, for example, here the choice is going to be the Scilab, the scientific laboratory, which started in 1990. And we have reached a stage where during this period particularly, people adopted this as a default tool for the classrooms itself. And this is open source software. You don't need to spend a pie for adopting it and learning it. So this is also very, very clear. Actually, the term computational thinking started getting a kind of a more prominent usage in day-to-day talk when this lady, Jeanette Wing, wrote a very small paper on computational thinking. Rather, she, in her presentation, said that she has a grand vision in which computational thinking will be a fundamental skill used by everyone in the world by the middle of 21st century. So fortunately, we are in the first quarter of the 21st century, and this is high time that we start focusing on these things so that when the time comes, which is really coming very rapidly, we are ready for taking leaps. And she said this computational thinking has to be there, just like reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, so these are the 3 R's which we are talking about. In this, there is one C which we need to really add, known as computational thinking. And it has a very interesting characteristic that once you develop that kind of a thinking, you can spread it also very fast by means of computing methods and computers which are available today in abundance, I would say. I think you must be, if you go on the internet and try to check how you can use mobile for doing computations, you will find lots of ideas there also. And since ages, scientists, engineers, historians, artists have been using, this kind of a computational thinking. And you will wonder when she said artists or historians, what do we mean by computational thinking? In the case of artists, an artist, when one has to really think of making, say, a portrait, he will have to really think of the kind of proportions with which he has to work or she has to work in giving life to that portrait itself so that it doesn't become a caricature. And artists are very good at that. And if you have to really convince yourself, go and study something about Michelangelo. You will find that he was such a fine uh, person with very good sense of geometrical and arithmetical thinking. And what are we doing actually on a computer? Ultimately, we do arithmetic only. If you ask what are the operations which you perform, you will always find that there is some kind of an arithmetic which is involved. Though in front, we don't see all those things when we use common tools which we are using around us, like, word processing or say making a PPT, etc. But at the back of that, you will find that somewhere some kind of a computational thinking has actually gone. I would say that it will be a good start that we start picking up some good books for mathematical modeling. Essentially, those need not be from physics. One book which I liked very much, which really gave me lots of simple exercises to perform in various environments, was this book on mathematical modeling with Excel. And I really liked it, that how they were actually trying to do all those problems which are needed by physics itself. And then we should not really forget the Nobel laureate Richard Feynman. You must have heard about Feynman's lectures on physics, but there are another set of lectures also called Feynman Lectures on Computation. In that, he actually tells, I think I must remind you that Feynman was one of the first persons to talk about quantum computing also. So when you look at these Feynman lectures on computation, you will find that he has presented a very good early view of how one can do quantum computing, develop quantum logical gates, use those for doing computations, etc., etc. And he was very confident that in near future, in the next 30 years, when he gave those lectures, we will be seeing these kinds of things becoming reality. And he writes in those lectures that computer science differs from physics, where he also, put and emphasized the word science. Please don't mind these spellings. In that, it is not actually a science. It doesn't study natural objects. Neither it is, as you might think, mathematics, although it does use mathematical reasoning quite extensively. Rather, computer science is like engineering. It is all about getting something to do with something, rather than just dealing with abstractions. So, when we start teaching physics, we expect that a student sitting in front of us is good at abstractions. And here he is emphasizing that when you have to do computation, you have to really go beyond those abstractions to get something real. This is very, very important point which he is making in this particular quotation itself. And I think these lectures are available, and they are worth reading. You can read those as a novel, and I am sure you will enjoy those things also. So just let me say that how is science done? Science actually is done in three ways, and it revolves around what is called scientific truth. And the scientific truth is the one which can be experimentally verified. It is not something which a theoretical physics says, or it is not something which computational physics says. But today what we are finding, because of our understanding of physics theoretically in terms of models, because of the tools which are available to us to do computations, we are finding that these two have emerged as competing tools for doing physics itself. Rather, now these tools have become so ambitious that they are guiding experiments. and I can give you a number of examples for that, how computation and material science is helping people design new kinds of tailor-made materials with specific properties for drug designing and many other such things. So these are the three, now the earlier people used to say that we have only two dimensions, but with the coming of computations, to arrive at a scientific truth has become three-dimensional. So we keep on verifying something which has been done experimentally, maybe by doing a computation, by using some kind of a model. We would like to go beyond that experiment to conjecture something new, which we can again tell people that go back and try to see whether that also comes experimentally true or not. And this is how we are actually doing science today. And this method is available not only for physicists, but it is also being used by chemists. It is also being used by biologists. I think whatever is happening for understanding the origin of life itself, people are trying to see that what are those signatures which are very, very important. And they are trying to do that computationally to understand life itself, understand biology itself. And if you want to really look at the timeline of this, you can go to these two timelines, timeline of computational physics, and second is timeline of scientific computing. These two timelines are available on Wikipedia. You can just click and reach there very, very comfortably. Now, I think during this course of the FDP, you will be shown number of exercises. And I think Shastriji is always ambitious in doing that. And you will find that these 6 steps will be common to that kind of a methodology which will be adopted. First is formulation of the problem. Once you have formulated a problem, then you will look forward to some kind of a numerical method. Third is you will make use of some kind of a computational language like Fortran, worksheet, some kind of a object-oriented, or maybe you would like to do some kind of a symbolic computation also. Maybe Scilab also offers some kind of a platform for that. And then you will go to visualizations. So when you are actually going to work in Scilab, you will find that the visualization tools are available to us also as part of the science laboratory itself. And then maybe after getting the results, you would like to have a closer look at those to see what kinds of improvements you can do in that. So it is a 4-step process. And after this 4-step process, which may look like, going inside a dark tunnel, you may see at the end of the tunnel light. So what is the first step? Formulation of an appropriate mathematical model. And this mathematical model arises from your physical thinking. Okay, so most of the physics which we are actually going to use to arrive at a mathematical model is thought here in this step itself. And once we arrive at a reasonably good model, we can also, at this end itself, try to think, if I get some results, how should I check whether my results are correct or not? So you may have to keep in mind some, parameters which you would like to substitute and see what results you are getting. Or you may try to, compare your results with already known results. So how are you going to do that? Some kind of test cases you would like to have for that. Once you have a mathematical model, I think everything becomes clear to you that to solve this problem, now what are the numerical tools which are needed for implementation of that model itself? And once you do that, you can arrive at some kind of a solution. But the most important step is that you have to take care of the validation of that solution also. And those tests which you have thought at the first step itself will become very handy in this last step, or what you call the fourth step itself. It also involves number of other considerations. For example, why should I try to solve a problem? And which problems I should solve? This is a very important question. This is where you start thinking of, searching for some problems which should give you some new insights, which should be able to take you beyond something which you know, and very clearly enunciating its statement. I remember when we used to, solve in late 70s and early 80s some problem on the computer, we always used to look for somebody's assistance in the computer center. And what used to be that assistance? We will go to a programmer, and programmer will ask us all sorts of questions about the problem, convert that problem into some kind of an algorithm or a flow chart, and then he will say, yes, now I will tell you how to do it. He may have asked you at that point of time to write your own code, and that was quite cumbersome because you had to, punch cards for running a code on the computer. And if there is something wrong with those punch cards, you have to once again fix the bug that where you have gone in punching these cards badly. And that was quite a tiring process, in fact. Today, with the help of these laptops or the workstations which we have got, all these things have been forgotten now. So in whole of this process, when you are formulating the problem, you will also come to know about what are the important variables involved and what are the laws which are actually being used, physical laws or laws governing the problem. If you are doing chemistry, laws which you have derived from chemistry. If you are doing material science, laws which you derive from, say, quantum mechanics itself, and expressing those in the form of mathematical equations. One of the very important things to keep in mind is identifying assumptions and approximations which are involved in arriving at that model. And what are the critical features which are very essential things which we need to keep in mind. One of the very interesting things about computers is that when you try to solve something, and suppose you arrive at a number which its memory cannot store, it will say that something has gone wrong. Or if in that process of approximations, if you find that something which you are calculating is being reported as 0, then whole of the computation may go haywire. So all these things need to be, conveyed and kept in mind when we are doing these computations on the computer itself. Now, this pictograph actually is giving you the different kinds of mathematical equations which you may get while working on the computer. For example, you may get lots of algebraic equations, linear or non-linear. I can give you number of such examples also. Now, for example, for a harmonic oscillator, f is equal to minus kx, you will say, oh, it's a linear equation, maybe easily solvable. But if you add another term to it, go beyond linear, say, for example, if you think of non-linear harmonic oscillator, you will find this algebraic equation will change also. Then we come across very many polynomial equations also. In fact, when we try to approximate trigonometrical functions on the computer, basically you are approximating those by some kind of a polynomial itself, which may have, say, either 10 terms or 15 terms or 100 terms or something like that. Then we know that trigonometry, exponentials, and logarithms, when they come, we get a set of equations which are transcendental in nature. And then of all this, I think the first three things we can encounter up to +2 stage. And the other three you may get to know at +2 stage, but these are the kind of sophistications we try to bring in when we go to higher physics itself. We may get something in the form of differential equations. So you may ask, how I can solve a differential equation on the computer. You may think of framing your problem as an integral equation, which you may like to ask how I would like to really solve it on a computer. Solving a differential equation is far more tricky than solving an integral equation or the equation in which, say, integrals are involved. It's far more easier. And once we have actually understood, and you will understand this at the first step itself, identification of the problem and formulating its statement. Then we really need to think about and take care about the numbers which are going to come. So once the mathematical model is in place, we can ask ourselves a question: can I follow some analytical approach to solve this model? If there is an analytical approach, then you will say, why solve it on the computer? Forget about it. But maybe somebody may come and say, don't worry, make use of the results which you have got to visualize these in the form of some kind of a graph. So in some cases, you will say you may not think about computational approach at all. But if you know that your mathematical model inherently requires solution of something numerically, then you have to look for an appropriate numerical method or approach to solve the problem. It may be as simple as finding a root of an equation, or numerical differentiation, or numerical integration, or solution of a differential equation, or some kind of a Monte Carlo approach, or maybe many such possibilities: classical Monte Carlo, quantum Monte Carlo, and so on. And we must not forget that whenever we try to, make use of some algorithm to solve that problem, there can be more than one ways which can be used for solving that problem. Maybe the skill or the art of computation lies in the fact that you may have to take a decision which is the most appropriate, because it is going to save your time. It is going to save your machine's time. It is going to save you in terms of what you call a race in research. It may really land you in a better position in the competition for that area in which you are interested in actually working. So let us try to visualize whole of the methodology in this pictogram. We have a statement of the physical problem. We will think of what mathematical concepts we need to translate it into a mathematical model. You open any book on computational physics, you will find what is written in black and white, if you exclude codes, involves these two what you call amalgamations only. Amalgamation of the physical laws with the mathematical concepts. Mathematical, they say, is what you call free imagination. Whereas when physics comes, it becomes a constrained imagination. And you have to be very good in that constrained imagination because you are bound by the laws of physics. Once you have a model, you will have to think of numerical method or approach. And then comes implementation. And in this implementation also, maybe you may worry about what kind of hardware you need, what kind of software you need. For example, if you have to do drug designing, maybe you will find that the hardware which we are using may not be enough. The memory which we have in our laptop is not enough to solve those problems. And once you have this hardware and software, and if you have done the first mathematical modeling and numerical method identification correctly, then you can arrive at a solution. But we don't really just say that we have arrived at solution. We look for its validity. If answer is yes, okay, you can apply whatever you have done here for real things also. But if it is not, then maybe you would like to look at, do I need to change my algorithm? You may like to look at, will it be better to change my numerical method? Maybe then we will get better results. Or maybe you will be pushed back to your basic model itself. And you may be asked to really look at what has gone wrong, why something which would have validated this way of doing the things is not happening. So I think this kind of a feedback mechanism needs to be there so that you are able to arrive at the answer. I hope you are familiar with these symbols also. Like, for example, this is a symbol for decision making. If you look at some algorithms in your books or big algorithms which people made, you will find that this decision making diamond is very much there. And you cannot really say no to it. Okay, all right. Let us try to do this in the case of a problem and as an example. And I'll do a very simple problem. Let us formulate a mathematical model for predicting the population growth of a city. Why I'm choosing this is because this is a model which is very, very popular in very many areas of physics also. You go to radioactivity, you will find that there is a decay model which we talk about. If you go to, say, electricity and magnetism, you will again find there are circuits which are charging and discharging, and what is the law of charging and discharging may have something to do with this population growth problem itself. And in this, once you have decided that I want to have a solution of this problem on the computer, then you can start with a good mathematical problem statement itself, so that you are very clear about what is your ultimate aim. And then what we will do is we will look for what are the basic assumptions which go into it, or are there any laws which are governing that. And we know that in the case of a population, one thing is very crucial, and that is, if we have large population, large people will give birth. If there is large population, more deaths are going to occur. So what we are saying is that both the growth, which is via birth, and the death, which is actually again happening here as something very basic, the rates, particularly I'm talking about rate. Rate means something changes with time. We know that these are some very basic assumptions which go into this kind of a model. So what is there in this model? We will look for variables involved. For example, population at a time t, our starting time, increase in population we would like to look at, and what kind of time interval we would like to choose over which we would like to see this increase in population. Maybe then we will try to really write down a formula which will tell me how the change in population is dependent on births and deaths. So you can see that if you are writing something as positive, that means you are adding population, and if there is something negative, that means there is some kind of a deletion taking place. Now, what is very very nice here is that the births depend upon the population PT. Deaths also depend on the population PT. The only difference is a positive and negative sign. So we can try to combine these together, and we find that this is a very simple law which we have really come across, that delta P is equal to the difference of the two constants multiplied by PT into delta T, where PT is the population at a given time T. Now we are ready to write down what will be delta P by delta T. And if I look at that, you will find it will be this CPT. And if we take the limit, you will find that this dP by dt is equal to CPT. I know how to solve this equation, because I can solve it simply by bringing this variable PT here and taking dt to the other side. You are going to get a logarithmic equation. You can always convert that into some kind of differential equation. And its solution is very simple, that population at any given time is equal to starting point population, which is P naught, multiplied by e raised to power minus lambda t. Okay. Now there are some very interesting things which we can see here. When C1 is equal to C2, try to have a look here, we will find change of population will be 0. Okay. And it will look as if there are 2000 people at any point of time, what we are going to see is just these set of people. Okay. If this C1 is, I said C1 is equal to C2, right? I think there is no confusion about it. So this model is very clear in our head. Now, what we do for doing numerical computation is to convert that differential equation into some kind of relation which can be used for doing computations. Once you know this, which is written here, you will find that now you should think about writing a program. You have already done algorithms earlier. You have already tried it, that in what ways it can be used. And then we'll validate the process itself. Are they calculated up to some desired limit of the accuracy or not? If we find that the validation is not okay, we may have to go back and need to do validation again. For example, it may have something to do with mathematical model, it may have something to do with numerical method, it may have something to do with the computational algorithm which you are actually thinking about. So I think this is the first part of the lecture which I wanted to talk about. Before I go further, I will invite if there are any queries from you. If there are any queries, I think there are some questions here. No. If there are any queries, you can ask me questions. So you can write down in the chat box also, and then we will proceed further. So it is as simple as that. Whatever I have explained, I think you don't need to know anything further. Rest is detailing. If you keep these fundamental steps in mind, things will be very, very fine for learning all those things. Maybe when you have come to this workshop, you have your own aims. Like, for example, you may like to think of learning a new tool like Scilab. Okay. Or you may like to ask some kind of problems to be solved using a Scilab. Okay. So I think this is something very, very important and must be kept in mind. So please ask me questions. I'll give you 2 minutes so that you may frame your questions, write down those in the chat box, and then I'll respond. In the meantime, I would like to take a cup of, water or a glass of water so that I'm ready for the next part of the lecture. You please write down your questions in the chat box. Is that okay? Shastri ji?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any questions, please? Kindly. I think Sir has covered most of the points which I wanted to cover under simulation methodology tomorrow. So it made my job easier anyway, but I'll still continue to make it a little shorter in that sense. And then so that, especially I think we can have some questions. Anyone has typed any questions? Not yet. Okay, I'll only put one question. Basically, like there is a testing and there is a validation. Two parts should be there. हमने ये सब कुछ सर से ही सीखे हैं, तो better sir says it rather than sir. Typically we have two stages, right? One is after we implement the algorithm, we need to test the algorithm that it is working correctly, and we also need to test the accuracy of the algorithm and all that. So we need to take some, I think, some kind of a known problem, and then second stage comes into validation, where we simulate by varying the parameters. So if you can give us some good examples, that will help, I think, everybody.
So I'm back, and I can see two questions typed here. Rather, one is a kind of a comment. Shastriji, if I may say it, it's a comment that we need to have two stages. Yes, when you write your code, there are many syntactical things which may happen. That sometimes syntax is not okay, something is going wrong there. So when we say testing the code, means that you have developed an algorithm for some numerical method. So you are testing whether that part of your code is okay or not. So that is one aspect. But when we are talking of validation, actually it is the context of a physical problem. Whether that is actually working or not, that is giving us reasonable results or not, which we already know. And I think writing tests for validation is also, as they say, an art. So that these validation tests are written in such a fashion that they try to imagine what are the things which may go wrong. Are they going wrong or not, or are they coming okay? If it passes that kind of a test, then you can have a lot of confidence on what you can do. There is a set of books on different languages, art of computing book. I hope you must be knowing about that. Those are the codes of numerical methods which have been tested, and they have given us what are the bounds within which those what you call subroutines will work. And you can really take those subroutines which are already tested in your problem and do the things without bothering about whether the code will work or not. But even bringing those patches into your modules of your problem may have some kind of problems. So all those things one learns, and one is able to do those things. But validation is very important from physics point of view also. Something which should come positive, is it coming positive or not? Something which should not go to infinity, why it is going to infinity when I am taking this particular parameter? So all these things come in that category. Now, Dr. Pavan has really asked a question, what type of simple projects we can give to our students? I think today, when we are talking a lot about, designing our, what you call, learning outcomes. Dr. Pavan, when we are talking about these learning outcomes, so now I think you can really think of the kind of learning outcomes you would like to have as a result of something which you are teaching to your students, right? So you can design those projects based on your learning outcomes itself. Like, for example, I'll give you one very simple example. That I know that throughout physics we talk of inverse square laws.
Yes, sir.
Right? Maybe I want to go beyond an inverse square law, and I want to really prove that line of thought. Analytically, we may say maybe it will become very complex, but computationally, you will find that you can play with these kinds of tricks and let people see whether these things will work or not. So I am talking of a very simple project, but you are extending it in some way. Or we normally talk about a simple pendulum. Can I really talk about non-linear pendulum also or not? computationally, it is not at all very difficult. So I think that is how you can think of bringing in some new ideas, new ways of doing the things also.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you.
So that is what we need to really keep in mind. So I think now I can move to the next part of my lecture. So let me come back once again. I was here. Now, this is also a very important aspect. We should be very clear about what do we mean by accuracy on the computer. So that means we must understand the limitations of the computer also. That it has a limited way of recording your numbers. And that is where, we come across whether we should do calculations which are up to how many significant figures. So if you want that, you want more accuracy, maybe you would like to have more significant figures in your answer. Then rate of convergence. You would like to really avoid a situation where you are not able to converge to a solution itself. So you go into some kind of an infinite loop. Then the method which you are using is whether it is numerically stable or not. For example, differentiations are numerically very tricky because inherently when you define a derivative, delta t approaching or x approaching always comes to zero, delta x approaching to zero comes into picture. So we have to really think about that. Then we have to think about efficiency also. Now these are the four things which we have to really think about. And you will find that very many times if four people write down a code for solving a particular problem, these may be the four aspects which may be different in these four programs itself, these four ways of doing the things itself. So these are something very inherent about numerical computing. You may find that when you try to say add something on a computer, and if you are writing answer only up to certain decimal places, a stage may come where you will find that the answer is not changing, but you were expecting that it should change. So we have to be very careful about that. And this again comes with experience only. For example, in the case of accuracy, approximations get involved in the mathematical procedure itself. There may be truncation errors. Then because of the hardware, inexact representations and manipulations of the numbers in the computer may get involved because of the round off errors itself, because you have to store in a particular word size. And if your number needs to be fitted in that word size of the computer by rounding off, so you never know what is happening at the back of the computer itself. So these are some of the things which we have to really take care of. Now, when we are talking of rate of convergence, you have to think of these in the context of the numerical method which we are going to use. Iterative process, some methods may converge, some may not converge. So when we are actually doing something in numerical methods also, we always tell when will this method work and when will this method not work. So all these, that is where instead of saying that we can use those subroutines as black boxes, it is always better that we train our students to see these aspects of these of the available things. For example, in Scilab itself, you will find that there are certain things which are inherently available in it. So you say that, all right, this should work. But you may at some point of time feel that, oh, this is not working. Why something is going wrong? Maybe you will say that the kind of accuracy which you desire, the kind of convergences which you desire are not there into the method which has been given to me as part of the toolbox itself. So it's always good to test those convergences beforehand. This is another aspect. And as I talked about numerical stability, and And these kinds of errors, they may get introduced without any knowledge to us and may grow differently in different directions. It may grow exponentially. If they grow exponentially, then we will find that our results will be unphysical and numerical instabilities will occur. Sometimes, numerical instabilities may arise from ill-conditioned problems also, that our problems are not properly conditioned. So the basic moral of the story is that you choose numerical methods which are not only fast but inherently stable. So sometimes we should not really think that something which is fast is good. But what we should make sure is something which is inherently stable. And if it is fast, that is acceptable. And this is also a key idea which we have to keep in mind. What is efficiency? It is actually a measure of amount of effort required both by human and by computer to implement the method. A method which requires less computing time and less coding effort is said to be more efficient. And you develop this kind of a art with practice only. And I think there are many points which can come with very well formulated problems which you give to your students or which you come across in your career also, where all these things become very, very crucial. One of the problems in which these things become very apparent, I can mention, is the study of chaos on the computer itself. So this will actually show you. Then the last one, the scientific computing environment which you are looking forward to. Maybe operating systems, prompts, commands, macros, batch files. Some idea of these may be very handy in formulating and getting a fast, hassle-free, comfortable way of doing the things. Then programming languages, which one you are going to use. So in this FDP, you have decided that you will choose Scilab, which is an option for MATLAB. There is another, in the Linux environment, matrix, MATLAB type of software available called Octave. Octave is very much closer to MATLAB as compared to Scilab. But Scilab is something which is now getting used by people. Another thing which we must keep in mind is, because I am talking as a physics wala, I am not a computing professional. And sometimes choice of what you are going to use for computation depends on the fact that how fast you can apply what you have learned. But ultimately, aim should be to develop good programming practices with clarity. Finally, graphic environment, visualization. Fortunately, in Scilab, it is built in spreadsheets. Otherwise, you can also have some other tools available to you, which are available to you in the open source environment, like GNU-Plot. Or you may have Origin, which is again a proprietary software, but maybe some, what you call test versions you may get free of cost also. So these are the environments which you would like to really work with. So question comes, why I should really use this scientific laboratory? And there are a number of answers which have been given for this. One is that it is freely available. Okay, that is a very important part of it. And second is it is open source, means new add-ons keep on coming for this also. Once something becomes popular with the scientific community, you will find that toolboxes also get developed. And in the context of Scilab, that is a correct way. So you will find there may be a tool which we call as quantum tool for doing quantum computation, which is available, say, in Scilab. You can imagine searching for such things also, which may make your life easy. This is a very, very important aspect. And then, as is true, scientific computing and the kind of design divide and conquer approach is always good. Divide it into small steps and then try to do the things as you find them comfortable or affordable. The emphasis here is that we are thinking of doing something which should be appreciated by our students, and they are able to learn these and use these in real applications also. Please do remember that there are many things which we have been able to achieve by means of this kind of computational modeling and thinking itself. We landed on the moon because of that. Drug designing these days, which we are doing, but don't forget, the sending man on moons involved a lot of classical physics. Drug designing involved a lot of quantum physics in that. When we are talking of simulations, maybe when people are doing fluid dynamics or maybe designing aeroplanes, they are using simulations a lot. Data analytics, data analysis is becoming a big field these days. We are talking of machine learning applications to physics problems. So I think these are the landmark things which one can think about and talk about, and that is what we must really ultimately focus for. So there are levels when you are teaching at undergraduate level, or when you are teaching at postgraduate level, or maybe when you are teaching for your research methodology courses. What level you would like to have your computational course will be designed by what you want to achieve ultimately after learning that. So may I say, wish you happy learning and computational physics, computational modeling, and computational thinking. Thank you very much.